Johnny Mnemonic was supposed to be a tiny $1.5 million art project, but once Keanu signed, it exploded to $30 million and chaos followed. Studio sabotage, naked sermons, and black market edits, this movie was doomed from the start. The last entry will blow your mind. Here are 20 weird facts you didn't know. 20. Launching platform failed, but its cyber trash chaos looked straight at The Matrix and smirked cult classic. Johnny Mnemonic wasn't just another forgotten sci-fi flick. It accidentally laid the groundwork for The Matrix. Its cyber trash chaos, neon data smuggling, and wired-up dystopia looked cheap, but the DNA was there. Corporations owning your body, hackers saving the world, and technology rotting humanity. Even though the launch bombed, cyberpunks and tech nerds kept quoting it for years. Writers, critics, even academics pointed to it as an unintentional blueprint for cyber anarchy on screen. By 1999, Wachowskis were running with the same virus-soaked paranoia and stylized tech hellscape. The failure became prophecy. In hindsight, this film wasn't dying. It was winking at the future. That's why decades later, it's a cult capsule nobody can quite erase. 19. The international box office saved its ass. Asia turned it into one of Sony's freak profit miracles. In the US, Johnny Mnemonic tanked. $26 million burned, only $19 million crawled back. But Asia, whole different story. In Japan, cyberpunk wasn't a joke. It was practically a religion. Manga, neon cityscapes, body mods. It all synced with Gibson's vision. The film pulled in international receipts that surprised even Sony, turning humiliation into a freak miracle. The US press buried it, but bootleg tapes and Japanese screenings kept it alive. The global box office became its coffin and resurrection at the same time. Cyberpunk may have been laughed out of Hollywood, but Tokyo embraced it, keeping the wires buzzing. Without Asia, this movie would have vanished completely. Instead, it rose like digital trash turned treasure. 18, Longo and Gibson fought rewrites hard, but lost the soul, leaving a neutered flick they straight up disowned. Robert Longo, an art rock painter turned first-time director, teamed with William Gibson, the godfather of cyberpunk. Together, they envisioned a razor-sharp, ironic, punk-as-hell sci-fi satire. The studio said, "Nah, make it an action flick." Scene after scene got gutted, irony bled out, satire amputated. Longo later admitted the film that hit screens wasn't his, it was mutilated Hollywood product. Gibson straight up disowned it, calling it neutered and heartless. Imagine the creator of Neuromancer watching his work get turned into bland shootouts. They fought until the end, but Sony's scissors won. What could have been an art house cyber nightmare became Frankenstein corporate cinema. Yet ironically, the broken version became the cult object the ruined dream fans wouldn't let die. 17. Keanu played a human USB stick with 80 gigabytes in his skull, sweating like crazy in 1995's Future Joke. In 1995, the film said Johnny's brain implant could haul 80 gigabytes of data, a number that blew minds then. Back in 95, home PCs averaged 500 megabyte hard drives. Johnny's brain carried 160 times that. Today, your phone laughs at 80 gigs, but then, it was God tier. Reeves leaned into it, playing Johnny stiff, frozen, robotic, almost USB stick chic. That wasn't bad acting. It was his choice. Keanu said Johnny was burned out by too much data, too much tech fried into his flesh. So he acted mechanical, detached, sweating paranoia. The joke? That future already looked outdated in 5 years. But Reeves's delivery turned clunky sci-fi into a weird time capsule of techno-fear. 16. VC nerds swear it smelled like Blade Runner and The Matrix shot years before Neo ever dodged bullets. Look at Johnny Mnemonic today and you see ghosts of Blade Runner and The Matrix. Neon slick alleyways, check corporate hellscapes. Check hackers as revolutionaries? Absolutely. This was Gibson's cyberpunk on screen, even if butchered. Blade Runner had birthed the aesthetic in 1982, but Mnemonic dragged it into the 90s internet era. And The Matrix? Released 4 years later, it mined the same digital paranoia veins, except it executed perfectly. VC nerds, film geeks, and critics swear Mnemonic is like a glitchy prototype, a failed test run for what Wachowski's later perfected. It's ironic. The film mocked as trash in '95 is now retroactively credited as one of the stepping stones to a cultural giant. 15. The hacking VR sequences look like bad Windows screensavers, but secretly predicted cyberspace addiction. Those VR hacking scenes, Johnny with a visor flailing in cyberspace, got mocked as clunky video game trash even in 1995. They looked like Windows 95 screensavers on steroids, neon blocks and flying icons. But here's the weird part. They accidentally predicted modern VR immersion and the addiction cycle around digital worlds. Critics trashed the graphics, but the imagery of Johnny, lost inside endless data stacks, feels creepily close to how people vanish into Fortnite, Second Life, or the metaverse. What was laughed off as cheesy CGI became a prophecy of people ditching reality for low-poly illusions. The future looked dumb, but it stuck. 14. The CD-ROM tie-in game was a pixelated FMV nightmare fever dream, cheap trash never meant for humans. In 1995, CD-ROMs were the hot tech. So of course, Johnny Mnemonic got a tie-in game. It wasn't good by any standard. Think grainy full-motion video cutscenes, stiff mouse clicks, and a story that felt like a half-baked fever dream. It looked like someone bootlegged Myst, then smeared static all over it. Critics trashed it as unplayable garbage, but somehow, that fits the movie's cult status. The game is so rare now it's a collector's oddity. Proof that Hollywood would slap a CD-ROM on literally anything in the 90s. In hindsight, the game's glitchy trash aesthetic is almost cyberpunk in itself. 13. Sony hyped with an early internet scavenger hunt and blew 20 grand in spammy cyber promo insanity. Sony didn't just market Johnny Mnemonic, they spammed the internet. In 1995, the web was still dial-up geek territory, but Sony launched an online scavenger hunt tied to the film. Prizes included cash, $20,000 blown on this bizarre promotion. Problem was, most people had no idea how to even play online hunts back then. Ads popped up in early chat rooms and primitive forums, confusing more than hyping. Critics call it one of the first viral campaigns, even though it mostly spread as cringe. But hey, it predicted how movies would abuse the internet for marketing decades later. Johnny wasn't ahead. It was too ahead. 12. NAS the nerve disease was basically Wi-Fi plague digital sickness infecting humanity before 5G conspiracy clowns. The movie's big plague? NAS, nerve attenuation syndrome. In 1995, it sounded like sci-fi gibberish. But watch now, and it feels eerily prophetic. NAS is described as humans getting sick from exposure to tech, signals, screens, constant data flow frying the brain. Basically, a Wi-Fi plague before Wi-Fi even hit households. Fast forward and people scream about 5G towers causing headaches and worse. The paranoia was baked into Gibson's script decades earlier. NAS was both metaphor and nightmare. Humans couldn't keep up with the tech they created. Watching Keanu reel from the sickness feels way too close to our burnout from screens world today. 11. Johnny's implant scanned as an anti-dyslexia device, sly nod to Keanu's real-life learning struggles. One blink-and-miss detail. Johnny's brain implant gets scanned at an airport, and it's registered as an anti-dyslexia device. That wasn't random. Keanu Reeves struggled with dyslexia growing up, often admitting school was a nightmare. He said books were like enemies, and teachers wrote him off. So the idea that his character's implant disguises itself as a learning aid, is a sly Easter egg nodding to Keanu's real struggles. It's subtle, but it humanizes the role. This stiff, robotic data mule with 80 gigabytes in his skull is hiding a piece of the actor's own past. A little personal pain smuggled into sci-fi madness. 10. A black and white cut finally dropped in 2022, showing Longo's raw, nasty vision, uncensored at last. Director Robert Longo always wanted Johnny Mnemonic to look more like an art house cyberpunk nightmare than a neon Hollywood action flick. In 2022, fans finally saw that vision. A 103-minute black and white cut released at last. No studio interference, no glossy polish, just his gritty, surreal dystopia. The restored version turned heads at film festivals, finally earning cult respect after decades of ridicule. For Longo, who called the original theatrical cut corporate trash, it was vindication. For fans, it was like opening a time capsule from 1995, raw, imperfect, but finally true to William Gibson's techno-paranoia roots. 9. Ice-T turned down paychecks just to play a cyber-anarchist warlord with pet dolphins. Ice-T didn't join Johnny Mnemonic for money, he did it for chaos. He was already huge in rap, dabbling in acting, and suddenly there he was, leader of the Low-Techs, a rebel hacker cult living in scrapyard towers. He said the part spoke to him, street anarchy against corporate vampires. Rumor says he turned down a bigger paycheck elsewhere just to wear glowing goggles and bark orders at cyborg dolphins. His presence cemented Mnemonic's street punk flavor. It wasn't a studio casting call, it was Ice-T injecting real hip-hop defiance into a cyberpunk future. Hollywood couldn't fake that flavor. 8. The Japanese cut ran 103 minutes packed with lost scenes and a different damn soundtrack. The US version ran 96 minutes, but Japan got the longer, richer cut, 103 minutes with extended scenes and even a different soundtrack. Fans who stumbled across imported VHS tapes in the late 90s discovered the movie had more depth and a stronger William Gibson vibe outside of America. Japan even leaned into the film's anime-like aesthetics, making it resonate harder with cyberpunk audiences. The different soundtracks swapped Brad Fiedel's chaotic industrial beats for Michael Dana's eerie atmosphere. Two versions of the same movie existed, creating a cult divide, one chopped, hollowed-out Hollywood export, the other closer to Gibson's bleak cyberpunk vision. 7. They shot Toronto and Montreal as Newark and Beijing, turning Canada into cyber dystopia on discount. Forget Hollywood sets. Johnny Mnemonic faked its future using Canadian cities. Toronto and Montreal doubled as dystopian Newark and Beijing. On the streets, it's skyscrapers, alleys, and steel factories shot under neon lights to create a chaotic, globalized nightmare. Why Canada? Cheaper tax breaks and flexible crews. It was a money-saving move, since the budget ballooned from $1.5 million to nearly $30 million after Keanu signed on. Watching closely, some landmarks give it away, but that only adds to the surreal vibe. Canada basically cosplayed the future, giving us a cyberpunk Newark that cost less and still looked industrially rotten. 6. The Cyber Dolphin Jones was real animatronic nightmare fuel nobody knew how to control. Johnny Mnemonic didn't rely on CGI for Jones the cybernetic dolphin. They built a monstrous animatronic beast. This thing thrashed in a giant water tank on set, malfunctioning constantly, spraying cast and crew with dirty water. The dolphin's brain tech rig looked insane, wires, blinking lights, electrodes stuck on its head like wet spaghetti. Ice-T swore it looked like a military experiment gone wrong. Kids who caught it on VHS remember Jones as pure nightmare fuel, not comic relief. The dolphin wasn't just a prop, it was a symbol of 90s sci-fi excess where practical effects spiraled into chaos. Jones remains unforgettable weirdness. 5. Dolph Lundgren's naked street preacher sermon got chopped by suits, but he still haunts the reels. Dolph Lundgren didn't just play a villain, he played a cybernetic street preacher spitting fire about God and technology. In one insane scene, he delivered a sermon totally nude, covered in tattoos, ranting like a cyber Moses. The studio freaked out and cut it, claiming it would confuse audiences and sink ratings. What remains is already insane, but fans who saw rougher cuts swear the lost naked preacher footage was some of the boldest in the film. Even censored, Lundgren's freaky preacher feels like he wandered in from a drug-fueled art film, proof of how weird Mnemonic could have been if the suits had backed off. 4. Sony's marketing team literally called Keanu a data Christ in banned promo art. Sony didn't know how to sell Johnny Mnemonic, so marketing got insane. One leaked ad campaign pitched Keanu Reeves as the Data Christ, arms outstretched with glowing wires like crucifixion imagery. Test groups freaked, religious watchdogs threatened lawsuits, and the posters got shelved instantly. Only a handful of mock-ups survived, whispered about in fanzines. But the concept stuck, Keanu as digital messiah, carrying humanity's sins in his skull. Years later, The Matrix nailed the exact same vibe and sold billions. Sony had the right instinct, just 10 years too early and way too heavy-handed. Data Christ never left the shadows, but it haunts mnemonic lore. 3. Warner Bros. Birthed it in 1990, then Time Inc. merger shelved the project until Sony dug it out. Originally, Warner Bros. Backed Johnny Mnemonic in 1990. But after Warner merged with Time Inc., the project fell into limbo. For years, it gathered dust. Nobody wanted to touch a cyberpunk flick that looked too weird and too niche. By the time Sony picked it up in the mid-90s, the script had already gone through countless rewrites. Gibson's sharp cyberpunk vision had been smoothed into a messy action thriller hybrid. It's one of those what-if Hollywood stories. If Warner had made it in 1990 with a smaller budget, Mnemonic might have landed as a grungy cult indie instead of bloated sci-fi chaos. 2. It was supposed to cost $1.5 million arty indie, then Keanu signed and it ballooned to 30. William Gibson and Robert Longo's original plan was tiny, a $1.5 million black and white art house movie, closer to punk cinema than Hollywood spectacle. Then, Keanu Reeves said yes. Studios smelled money, ballooning the budget to a staggering $26 to $30 million. Suddenly, the scrappy cyberpunk flick became a bloated studio machine with massive sets, CGI attempts, and international marketing campaigns. The irony? That corporate upgrade killed the very vibe Gibson had written. Instead of raw, messy cyberpunk, we got something trapped between indie grit and blockbuster polish. Keanu's star power sold the movie, but also doomed it to be too big to fail. 1. Henry Rollins screamed medical paranoia as Spider the underground techno-doc. Hardcore punk legend Henry Rollins dropped into Mnemonic as Spider, the underground doctor who ranted about nerve disease and corporate rot. Rollins wasn't acting much. He basically played himself on speed. He screamed lines about technology frying human nerves like a man mid-concert, veins bulging, spit flying. Fans remember him more vividly than half the main cast because he embodied Gibson's paranoia perfectly. He wasn't some polished Hollywood actor. He was raw energy and fury trapped in a cyber hellscape. Casting Rollins was one of the film's smartest moves. He added jagged edges the studio couldn't sand down, keeping at least one role pure punk. That's the rabbit hole of Johnny Mnemonic. If you love raw, weird film history like this, check out the next deep dives on cult sci-fi disasters. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another wild breakdown like this one.